As your thoughts naturally flow, you might begin to wonder how beliefs, like seeds, take root, grow and evolve within the fertile soil of your mind. You see, beliefs, they can be like invisible maps guiding our perceptions and actions. Sometimes they vet so deeply, they can feel inevitable. And yet, as you're considering these words, you may start to notice a gentle truth. Maps can be redrawn, directions shifted, and destinations chosen anew. Let's imagine a belief, like negative outcomes are inevitable. It may seem solid, doesn't it? But imagine holding it in your hands, heavy at first, and then noticing how it begins to shift, lightening as you realize it's just a construct, not a reality. Those past experiences, the ones reinforcing failure, can start to dissolve like sand through your fingers. Because now, in this moment, you're becoming aware of something. The past is not the future. And isn't it curious how focusing on problems may seem prudent, even safe? Yet, as you anticipate potential pitfalls, there's also the possibility of seeing solutions arising naturally, effortlessly. What would it be like to trust that your mind already knows how to prepare for the unexpected, leaving room for hope too? Now you might consider the idea of expectations shaping outcomes. Perhaps before, there was a sense of inevitability, like being on a one-way street. But as you think about it, roads often intersect, offering new patterns. Imagine stepping onto a new one where your actions align, with a quiet growing confidence that outcomes can change with just a little shift in belief. And then there's that skepticism towards optimism. It's protective, isn't it? Like armour. But what happens when you realize armour can be set aside when it's safe? You might begin to notice how hope doesn't have to be naive. It can be discerning, grounded and wise. And perhaps now, as you're reflecting, the idea of balancing hope with realism feels natural. Sometimes people believe external forces dictate everything. But haven't you noticed, as you sit here, that even now you're making choices? Choices about focus, about attention, about what's possible in this very moment. And as the awareness grows, you might start to feel a sense of quiet empowerment, subtle yet undeniable. And for those moments when life feels heavy, filled with suffering, there's an interesting paradox. Meaning often emerges from the very struggles we wish to avoid. Imagine for a moment every challenge is a stepping stone, guiding you to something deeper, richer and more fulfilling. What would it be like to trust even the hardest moments can shape resilience, wisdom and compassion? Now as you think about relationships, perhaps the distrust that once seemed protective begins to soften. Imagine feeling safe enough to connect, trusting there are people who genuinely care. Picture a growing sense of support, one that dissolves isolation and replaces it with warmth, understanding and belonging. And isn't it interesting how the mind can begin to rewrite its own stories? Where resignation once reigned, you might notice a flicker of curiosity. What would it be like to see effort as worthwhile, even rewarding? What if every small step carried you towards something meaningful, something possible? And as these thoughts settle, you may not need to consciously understand every shift that's taking place now. The mind has its own way of integrating what's useful, letting go of what no longer serves. And as you open your eyes to a new world, perhaps you'll notice subtle changes, a lighter perspective, a gentler approach, and a growing belief in the possibility of balance, growth and hope. Because here's the thing, pessimism, like any mindset, is just a lens, and lenses can be adjusted, refined or even replaced. And as you move forward, you might find yourself naturally gravitating towards new ways of seeing, ones that honour your experiences, while inviting in the light of possibility. And isn't it reassuring to know that this shift, however small, has already begun? So take a moment now, just to let yourself settle, deeply, comfortably, because as you do, there's a part of your mind, beyond conscious thought, that's already beginning to absorb these ideas, naturally and effortlessly. And isn't it fascinating how some ideas feel like they've always been there, quietly waiting to emerge? Consider this: negative outcomes are inevitable. It might feel like a truth, but imagine it now like a cloud. A heavy one at first, perhaps. But notice how clouds move, shift, and dissolve. As you watch this, you might sense a space opening, where new possibilities shine through, clear and bright. And isn't it interesting how the past, once so fixed, becomes a fluid stream, flowing gently into the distance? You see, the mind loves to find patterns, and as you focus on past failures, something subtle begins to change. What if failure was never the end? What if it was the beginning? A chance to learn, to grow. And as you think about this now, perhaps you feel an unexpected lightness, a quiet knowing that success and failure, they're just steps in a larger dance. And there's wisdom, isn't there, in focusing on problems? It's protective, like scanning the horizon for storms. But as you do, imagine now what it would feel like to notice something else. Patches of blue sky breaking through. What would it be like to trust that your mind, your deeper self, knows how to prepare for challenges while leaving space for hope? As if the horizon, once so grey, now shimmers with possibility. Now think about those self-fulfilling prophecies. You've seen how expectations can shape outcome, haven't you? And as you think about that now, imagine those expectations like seeds. When you plant a seed, you choose. Will it grow into weeds or into something vibrant, thriving? Notice how, even now, your mind is tending to its garden, clearing space for new, life-giving beliefs to take root. Because expecting the worst may have felt like safety. But doesn't it feel different now? To imagine expecting something better, to sense that quiet, building motivation to act, to engage, to create outcomes that surprise you in the best possible ways. And as you think about optimism, you might begin to see it differently. It's not naivety, is it? It's not ignoring reality. Imagine optimism now as a calm, steady light, illuminating what's possible, what's achievable. And isn't it comforting to realize this light, it doesn't blind you to risks. It simply helps you navigate them with grace. What if, from this moment, a part of you began to trust that balance, hope grounded in realism, it's not only possible, but already unfolding within you? And perhaps you felt, at times, the world is dictated by external forces. But as you think about that now, notice something different. Even in this moment, there are choices, subtle, powerful. Choices about where you place your focus, how you respond, what you believe. And what if those choices were like ripples, expanding outwards, creating waves of change you hadn't even expected? Isn't it fascinating to realize you've already had more control than you thought? Now let's turn to suffering, that heaviness we all feel at times. Imagine it now like a knot in a rope. At first it's tight, constricting, but as you focus on it, gently something begins to shift. The rope loosens, the knot untangles, and suddenly it's a thread you can weave into something new, a story of resilience, of growth, of meaning. What if, from this moment, you began to see struggle not as a burden, but as a stepping stone, a challenge that refines you, shapes you, and brings you closer to your deeper strength? And as you think about relationships, notice how even the smallest flicker of trust can grow. Imagine now the warmth of connection, a spark that lights in you and spreads outward, drawing others towards you. You might begin to sense how people, once distant, feel closer. And isn't it reassuring to know that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt stronger than before? Now picture resignation, heavy, dull, unmoving, and then imagine what it would feel like to let it go. Like setting down a weight you've carried for too long. What takes its place? Perhaps a flicker of hope, a quiet voice whispering, what if? What if effort mattered? What if small steps led to something extraordinary? And what if you've always been capable of more than you imagined? As these ideas settle, they don't need to be forced, do they? They simply unfold, like petals opening in the sun. And as they do, you might notice a sense of ease, a quiet assurance that your mind is already doing the work, absorbing, integrating, transforming. And whether you notice it now or later, you'll begin to feel these shifts, subtle at first, perhaps but growing stronger, like roots anchoring deep in the soil. Because here's the truth, beliefs can change, effortlessly, naturally, and as they do, so too does your world. And isn't it comforting to know this change has already begun? Whether you see it today, tomorrow, or in the weeks to come, it's there, growing, unfolding, and leading you towards a brighter, more balanced way of being. And as you move forward, you might even find yourself smiling, knowing the best transformation often happens when you least expect them. So let yourself drift now into a place of stillness, a gentle pause in the rhythm of thought. And as you do, the conscious mind can take a step back, while your unconscious, powerful, resourceful, steps forward to explore new possibilities. And it's curious, isn't it, how the mind can hold old beliefs tightly, yet begin to loosen its grip the moment it feels safe to do so. Think now of that belief. Negative outcomes are inevitable. It's been there, hasn't it? Like a shadow. But shadows only exist where there's light. As you notice that, you might feel a subtle shift. The sense that outcomes, like the weather, can change. Because deep within you, there's a knowing. No storm lasts forever. And every cloud eventually gives way to sunlight. And isn't it fascinating how the past, those memories reinforcing failure, they can start to blur, as if seen through frosted glass. As they soften, the space for something new opens, perhaps an awareness that the future is unwritten, filled with infinite possibilities you've yet to discover. And focusing on problems, it's served a purpose, hasn't it? A way to feel prepared to protect yourself. But imagine for a moment that your focus is like a beam of light. When you shine it on problems, you see them clearly, yet when you turn it towards solutions, something else comes into view. Pathways, opportunities, the next step. Notice how your mind can begin to balance that beam, naturally, effortlessly. There's a quiet realization growing that preparing for the worst doesn't mean ignoring the best. What would it feel like to let that balance guide you, a gentle harmony between caution and hope? You might also think about self-fulfilling prophecies, the way expectations seem to shape reality. But what if those expectations, like clouds, were never fixed? What if they could drift, shift, and transform? Imagine now the belief that negative outcomes will happen, beginning to dissolve, replaced by curiosity. What if something good is just as likely? And notice how your actions begin to align with this new thought. Small, subtle changes, like planting seeds in fertile soil. Without even trying, you might find yourself acting in ways that invite success, creating outcomes that surprise you, in the best possible ways. Optimism might once have seemed naive, unrealistic. But what if it were something else entirely? Not blind hope, but a quiet strength, a belief in your own ability to navigate life's challenges. Imagine optimism now, like a steady flame. It doesn't ignore the darkness, it simply lights the way through it. As this idea takes root, you might feel a growing sense of balance, the ability to see risks without being consumed by them, to notice challenges without losing sight of opportunities. And is it reassuring to know that optimism, once distant, can feel so natural, so grounded? And perhaps there's been a belief that control lies outside of yourself, in the hands of fate or others. But consider this, even now, you're making choices, choosing where to place your focus, how to interpret these words, what to take with you. And as you notice that, you might begin to feel something subtle but powerful, a quiet sense of agency, like the first glimmer of dawn. Because even when external forces seem overwhelming, your choices, your perspective, your actions remain yours. And what if those small choices were the foundations of something greater, a ripple effect shaping your life in ways you've yet to imagine? Now turn your attention to struggle. It's been there